Hi class, I wanted to do an end of semester reflection video. First I wanted to just thank you for the semester. I think a lot of us were burnt out after the spring semester and I was a little worried about going into summer. This is actually my favorite class to teach. I only get to teach it once a year now, and so I really wanted it to go well, but I wasn't sure how kind of the mindset of everyone would be. And I'm really appreciative that you guys were really enthusiastic about the material and really participated, wrote really nice reflections and thoughts and discussions. So I'm glad that you kind of rebounded from the spring semester, I felt like, and that you were really enthusiastic, and I appreciate that. So, what I'm going to talk about here is just some things about this last module, some things about current events and how they relate to health specifically, and then also the kind of wrap up for this short summer semester and what I'm teaching in the fall in case you want to take any of my classes. So, in this module, we talk about health equity, health literacy, and then kind of about future directions. And this is pretty basic information in this lecture with health equity and health literacy. I really wanted you to have a good foundation of what these terms mean in health and kind of the importance of understanding them. And, kind of like for anything in this class, you could take your whole career could be about health literacy and understanding health literacy and helping people improve health literacy or helping doctors, talk to patients. So, this is really just me trying to give you kind of the knowledge, the base knowledge, the foundational knowledge, and you can build upon that if you are interested in these topics. With future directions, current events make this a little bit tough, and we'll talk about this in a second. But one thing I used to do is structure it off of healthy people, and so you watch a video about healthy people 2020. I'm not sure what's happening with healthy people 2030. I thought there might be more information out, but I don't even see that they're meeting in the last year. So hopefully that's still happening because it does give us a nice framework to work off of, like a reference. But I still think if you look at Healthy People 2020, you can get an idea of what the goals were that they made in 2010 for 2020. And like thinking about, where are we now? Where can we go in the next 10 years? And I think within the last 6-7 months, there have been a lot of current events that really make us rethink about kind of our future directions, at least for me. And it's really hard right now. My job as a professor, one of my jobs is to take all the information that's kind of flying up here and take it all and kind of package it and push it out to you guys in a way that's understandable. But I feel like right now there's just so much information that it's like overwhelming trying to like pull everything together, make sure what's facts, what's not facts, what's slightly exaggerated, or what do we think maybe is true, but maybe we don't have enough evidence for it. So I have found it a little bit overwhelming, especially in the past, 3 or 4 months in regards to just health information coming out, everything, trying to figure out. And that's why we don't have a whole lot on COVID in this module or this summer, because it's just everything seems to be changing so quickly. But I do want to highlight one thing is that I just saw this today from The Lancet, which is one of the premier international journals in health. And so this says how many people could be at increased risk of severe COVID-19 due to underlying health conditions. And so 22 to 24, that's kind of strange, or 22.4, of people around the world have at least one underlying condition that puts them at increased risk of severe COVID-19 if they are infected. So if you remember back to, I believe it was Module 1, we talked about how most people, we're not, there's an increased risk of these chronic conditions. It used to be acute or short-term conditions that, were the highest for most people, back in the 1600s, but now we have these kind of chronic conditions, and they really do put people at a higher risk. And That's not saying, of course, that people who don't have any chronic conditions aren't susceptible to COVID-19. We've seen some really kind of popular examples of that in the past few months. But overwhelmingly, it does seem that those people that have some kind of underlying condition have a more increased risk of COVID-19. So, and this just shows that we don't do a lot of international health in here, but this just shows kind of the differences between the continents, and basically that those continents that have a higher older age population, hopefully that made sense. So basically, there are more old people in Europe and North America than in Africa and Latin America. Many reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into here, but that is, so if there's more old people and old people are at higher risk, then more people are going to get infected in these countries. So it's just something to think about as we move forward. Obviously COVID-19 isn't a chronic condition, but chronic conditions don't help it, right? So we can't all of a sudden, we have to think about kind of total health. We can't just all of a sudden pivot to preventing, these colds or viruses that come up because, chronic disease is still important. So we have to be prepared for a lot of different scenarios in health. And that's one of the issues is like if it's not funded well, if our CDC isn't funded well, if we're not doing research on all these different possibilities, then when something happens like COVID-19, we're not prepared. And that's part of what happened this time. We weren't quite prepared for something. Even though I think there was some understanding that this idea of a pretty major virus was, possible. So that's just something to think about, is that, it's not like we can completely forget about the importance of trying to prevent chronic conditions, because chronic conditions are probably always going to increase your risk for other diseases. The other big thing but I think we will see some shifts in, funding, definitely, for, trying to get some viruses under control and prevent them in the future. So some funding will shift around, definitely, is to be expected. And by funding, I mean that like the government and bigger agencies and organizations will put a lot of money toward answering some of these questions. Obviously we're trying to develop a vaccine too, but how can we prevent other viruses or mutations of viruses? So I do think like a lot of organizations will start funding that kind of health a little bit, and maybe back from some other things. But I think that's something to keep an eye on too in the future. The other thing that I think will have a major implication for our health systems is the Black Lives Matter movement. So I definitely support the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically in health. I wanted to, I put it on a slide. So I wanted to talk about this. So I just saw this the other day, and this is an Instagram post that I did a screenshot for. So talking about racism in the health field. And we talk about this in my community class a lot, but let me pull up some of the statistics from this post. So Black patients are subject to longer wait times to see physicians in primary care and ER. The one that we talk about in my community health class is that Black moms have 3 times the number of preventable pregnancy-related deaths versus white moms. And so this is something that has gotten a lot of attention in the past 2 years or so, because there's been some really high-profile cases. Serena Williams is one. I'm a tennis fan, so that was something that I saw. But where she had post-pregnancy complications and her doctors didn't take her seriously, and she basically had to be like, hey, I know my body, something is wrong, something is not right, and be really firm. And it's Serena Williams had to fight for proper health care. And can you imagine if you're not Serena Williams, what is going to happen then? They're not going to listen to you, right? And so we talk about that in my community health class, because I think that that's important. The other thing, some of the other stats that they present in this post is that Black patients don't get early cancer diagnoses of life-saving cancer treatments. Especially in breast cancer, there's some huge disparities related to mortality rates in breast cancer between Black and white women, and it's not because um, it's mainly because Black women get diagnosed at a later stage, so it's more fatal. So again, it's nothing to do with individual choices, and I'll make this point in a little bit again too. It's like systemic issues in health in the healthcare world. Um, And so I will try to remember to put the link to this because they have a really great resource of all of these things plus the sources for them that that is important to understand, especially because I know a lot of you are going into pre-medicine or are pre-medicine, pre-health, thinking about going in, and I think that this is not that I want to like usurp what Black Lives Matter is doing for police brutality and some of the other things, but I also feel like this is a time when a lot of systems are going to get dismantled and rebuilt, and this is the time then to really talk about racism in the healthcare system and to really work at changing it. Um, so I support this movement. I think it's very important, and that I think that going forward, I hope that you guys, especially if you're a non-Black student, that you take the time to do the readings that are out there, the information that's out there to better understand this movement, and then also better understand how you can be supportive of your fellow Black students. So I'll link this stuff. If you want other resources, definitely just ask me. Like, I follow a ton of health people on Instagram, so it's pretty big topics right now. Um, like I said, I focus more on health just because that's my interest, but I probably have links for everything because I follow like a million people on Instagram too. So I definitely suggest, like, if you are going whatever field you're going into, I think an important thing is to diversify your feed, your Instagram feed if you're on Instagram, or whatever however you get information. Make sure you're following various people. Make sure you're following Black doctors. Make sure you're following Black physical therapists, Black occupational therapists. Whatever your field is, like, follow that. Last summer, I got really into learning more about Indigenous health, and so I followed a bunch of like Instagram influencers, I guess, in that area. And I've just learned like so much. And so I think just by, following a few people, kind of understanding their perspective or trying to understand their perspective is really helpful in just broadening your base understanding too. Because the way that, they're talking about their lived experience that you can never have, but you can try to understand it. And I think that's really important, especially if we're working with people, and a lot of us will. It's hard not to work with people, but I think it's important to have kind of like a multicultural empathy and work on that, and that really can only be if you talk with other people and you read about other people and you interact with other people. Okay, so overall, this course, like the three big takeaways, or the main factors influence our, or many factors influence our health. Super important, like really important to understand this. And I think this is something that in a personal health class, when I first started teaching this class, I taught it like the person before me, and it was very focused on like individual influences. And I just feel like that really misses the boat on understanding what our health is and what other people's health is. Because our health isn't just what we decide. There's so many things. Like, and I think the past 7 months is a perfect example of this. You can make healthy decisions, and we're still in a quarantine, and you could still get COVID. Um, you know, and especially with Black Lives Matter, you're just Black, and like the world influences your health. And so I think that in this class, it may seem that I focus on things other than personal health a lot, but that's just me trying to really allow you to understand like the fullness of health, that it isn't just that we can decide to be healthy. Like, are we allowed to make that decision? Can we actually access things that we need to be healthy? Can we afford things that we need to be healthy? All of these things influence our health. um, is the government making decisions for us? Are those good decisions regarding our health? And we've seen that play out with COVID too. Different states are doing different things. Different counties are doing different things. So, that's one thing that I really hope that you come out of this class. If you didn't kind of have that fullness, that full understanding of what influences our health, I feel like that is like the number one takeaway that I want you to have from this course. Number two, I know this annoys a lot of you, but I make you use citations because I want you to think about number two and be able to do number two, which is that we need to use evidence to make decisions regarding our health and other people's health. And um, opinions are great, but they have to be based in reality. They have to be based in the best evidence that we have right now. And like with COVID-19, evidence changes a lot. Like we don't really know some things. Um, we saw that with wearing our masks. Yes, no, yes, no. Um, but I think it's like at the moment, what is the best evidence that we have, and use that to make decisions regarding our health. And really, hopefully you learned, how to find some good information, and that, it is just so important to, especially if you're going into a health field, to rely on, evidence to make these decisions. And then number three, I didn't hit on this as hard because this semester I didn't emphasize this as much this semester because of everything going on. I feel like it's kind of hard to talk a whole lot about self care, or you know um, being like kind of making choices about our health, because there's just so many things going on that are kind of outside of our control right now. But I do want to remind you that our health is, I like to call it a journey, which sounds a little new agey, I understand, but it really is. It's making these choices the choices that we can make, making them, and understanding that, we are going to always have to make choices and make decisions, and, you know, about our health. And it's not just today or tomorrow, or like losing 5 pounds this month. It is doing this for the rest of our lives. And so it really is kind of like a marathon, not a sprint, for a cliche there. But it really is just, a continuous um, journey about your health. And that's why when we talk about making goals, we want to make them goals that we can reach, because we're always going to have to think about our health, and we're always going to think about, how can we be the healthiest that we can be in this moment? What choices can I make? Am I allowed to make that can make me the healthiest person I can be right now? And if I don't make great choices today, tomorrow's a new day. I can make new choices in that day. So I think it's really important to have a good mindset about our health, a positive mindset as much as we can do, and a real like mindfulness mindset. And that idea that our health is, just like they talk about in mindfulness, up and down, comes and goes, but what we can control in the moment is really what's most important for us and for our health. Okay, so those are the big takeaways I hope that you got from this class. And then I want to talk just really briefly about my fall 2020 classes. Both, I'm teaching in two different kind of colleges, and both of them are mainly going to be online in the fall. Oh, I have a typo there. I'll talk about that in a second. But my one class is HSC 3201, Community Health. That's all my sections are going to be completely online in the fall. Those classes, or that class, is Community Environmental Health, is the full title to it. It's basically like if you, personal family health focuses more so on the individual, community health focuses more on community health. So we talk more about some of those things I talked about, like differences between race, ethnicities, how we can go, how we can work in communities, and help communities become healthier, and things like that. Really focus though on cultural competency, going into communities and making sure that we are not just like going in and saying that we know or all knowing people like healthcare professionals, but going in and helping people make good decisions, allowing them space to grow too. And we also talk a lot about policies in that class, and how policies can affect community health and what kind of policies we can make and help do as health professionals. My second class, I have a typo here. I just have an extra 3. It's HSC 3537, I'm pretty sure. That's medical terminology. That's always online. I am redoing this class for the fall, so it will be a new format. It won't be that e-textbook that's normally used, that's expensive. It'll be a cheaper, kind of like regular textbook, and I'm gamifying it a little bit, so hopefully it'll be fun, but it will definitely be different. So if you've heard about that class before, it does have quite a reputation. It is going to be different, at least my section is. And then my third class is an IDS 2935, and that's like a placeholder. So there's a lot of 2935s, but my specific class is Health Mythbusters. It's a Quest 2 class. Quest is like the new Good Life. A lot of you don't have to do it yet, but that class is kind of going to be like this class, but we're going to go through and focus on different myths. So we'll talk about like sugar is bad for kids. Is that like how did that myth happen? What's the evidence for against that myth? And kind of come and try to bust some of these pretty these health myths that just kind of exist for some reason or other. So I think that'll be fun. It's a mix of psychology, which is my background, and health. It is right now. It's in the system as meeting Tuesday, Thursdays, but class is also having most of their classes online. So it will be mostly online, but we'll likely meet via Zoom or Teams or something occasionally in the class period. So if you have classes that overlap with that class and you want to take this class, we can probably work something out because we're only going to meet every once in a while on our Thursday time period, and it's all going to be online. So those are the classes I'm teaching this fall. We don't have our spring schedule yet, so I can't tell you what I'm teaching in the spring, but I usually teach basically these three or four classes: personal health, community health, medical terminology, and now I'll teach this Quest 2 class every other semester. So if you have any questions about any of the classes I teach, definitely just reach out and email me, and we can figure something out. Again, thank you for a really great short semester, and I hope you have a good rest of your summers.